And we have some breaking news coming into our newsroom this afternoon. Sources telling ABC News that a Trump-appointed prosecutor is seeking an indictment against New York Attorney General Letitia James on charges of alleged mortgage fraud. So I want to get straight to our chief investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersi, who has been tracking this for us. And Aaron, what can you tell us about these alleged charges?
President Trump's handpicked U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsay Halligan, is asking a grand jury to indict Letitia James, the sitting and elected New York State Attorney General, on mortgage fraud charges. This investigation has been going on for a number of months. A previous prosecutor, we've been told, concluded that there was not enough evidence to charge Letitia James with mortgage fraud. That prosecutor was forced out, and Trump's handpicked U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan is in. The same prosecutor who opted to move for an indictment against the former FBI Director James Comey is now asking, according to law enforcement sources, the grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia to return an indictment against Letitia James. It's not immediately clear what the outcome of the grand jury presentation is, whether the grand jury is going to go forward with an indictment, whether Halligan needs to make an additional presentation to that grand jury, Alex. But she has been under investigation for mortgage fraud in connection with a property that she purchased in Norfolk, Virginia.
As you mentioned, that interim attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsay Halligan, also bringing that case against former FBI Director James Comey. But Aaron, I'm curious, have we heard from James or her office yet on this?
We haven't yet. We were seeking some kind of comment and reaching out to her attorneys. Her attorneys said they declined to comment on the grand jury presentation at this point. The outcome is not certain. Until it is, federal prosecutors would be under no obligation to formally notify James or her attorneys that the case has actually been put before a grand jury for a vote. So they had no comment at this stage. But we know previously her attorney, Abby Lowell, has said that this is a politically motivated prosecution and has really rallied against what he's called the weaponization of the Justice Department to suit President Trump, and has said it would be unjust to pursue a prosecution of Letitia James, who has done nothing wrong and who a prior prosecutor concluded either did nothing wrong or just didn't have enough evidence to move forward with a case.
Aaron, stick with me because I want to bring in our Washington Bureau Managing Editor, Catherine Falders, who has also been tracking this with us. And Catherine, to Aaron's point, or the point that he just made, ABC News has previously reported that there wasn't enough evidence to charge James here. So how did we get to this?
Well, we knew that when President Trump installed Lindsay Halligan, his former defense attorney, that it was in hopes of getting indictments returned and seeking indictments of people who Trump perceives to be his political enemies. You saw James Comey just appear in court earlier this week. This is obviously the same U.S. Attorney's Office seeking this indictment against Tish James. Now, we know that the former U.S. Attorney, as Aaron touched on a bit, Eric Siebert, he's become the center of this, frankly, because he was fired by Trump because he believes that there wasn't enough evidence to charge Tish James. Now, we do know that this U.S. Attorney's Office is not just investigating one of her properties. There's a couple properties that they're investigating. It's unclear exactly what evidence Lindsay Halligan presented to the grand jury today. But just to give you a breakdown of how it works in this particular courthouse out there in Alexandria, indictments are returned at the end of the day. So it's likely that at some point in court, she will either appear, or a foreperson of the grand jury will appear before the court to return these indictments. So we will then figure out what the result is, if a grand jury voted to indict or if a grand jury declined charges here. So that's obviously what we're waiting for, and we know they've been weighing the evidence. We expected in the coming weeks that this would happen, and it's likely that Tish James isn't just being investigated in this district, in the Eastern District of Virginia, also other districts as well.
Well, and what can you tell us about these investigations, specifically into mortgage fraud? It strikes me this was also some of the same kind of allegations that were lobbed about the Federal Reserve Board of Governors Chair Lisa Cook. She was accused of mortgage fraud by the president at one point as well.
Yeah, so again, it's not entirely clear what evidence Halligan presented to the grand jury, but if you go back to our previous reporting on this prior to Eric Siebert being ousted from his position, we detailed, at least in part, their mortgage fraud investigation. And it turned out that they only had one piece of paper, a power of attorney agreement in which Tish James checked a box that said something would also be her primary residence, if you will. The other documents that investigators collected actually had email communications from James that said, I don't plan to live here. I don't obviously plan to use this particular residence as a primary residence. And investigators in the James investigation spoke to, at least a few weeks ago, they had spoken to 15 witnesses, and they hadn't been able to get any probable cause here, any evidence to prove that Tish James knowingly lied on one piece of paper that a particular residence would be her primary one. So that is why, after pretty extensive investigation, that the U.S. Attorney's Office and prosecutors determined internally that they would not attempt to bring charges against her. Now, in comes Lindsay Halligan, and she's clearly presented some evidence, according to our sources, to a grand jury today in hopes of getting an indictment returned. We just don't know the result of that yet. It's very possible the grand jury could say that just doesn't do it for us, and we are not indicting, what's called as a no true bill.
All right, stick with me, Catherine, because I want to bring in ABC News legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona for more on this. And Bernarda, there's the old adage that a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich here, but can you break down the specific complexities of this case? Do you feel like an indictment is likely?
So I have issue with this because when you're dealing with one prosecutor in AUSA that determined there wasn't sufficient evidence, or for some reason that they couldn't move forward to present a case to the grand jury, and now you have another prosecutor presenting a case to a grand jury. So I would like to know, what is the difference between the two prosecutors in terms of, was there additional evidence, or is this something that the prosecutor was seeking to get an indictment, which is very easy to get an indictment, because when you're dealing with a grand jury presentation, it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecutor is the one that leads the investigation, leads the presentment of the evidence, and all they have to show that there's probable cause, reason to believe that there's sufficient evidence that a crime was committed. Remember, when it comes to a grand jury presentation, the judge is not present, the defense attorney is not present, and the person that they're seeking an indictment against is not present either. This is a prosecution-focused presentation.
Well, and Bernarda, if an indictment does come down, what is next for Tish James?
Well, if an indictment does come down, of course, one of the first things that needs to happen is that she needs to appear before a judge or a magistrate in terms to be let known of what the charges are, and also for her to have counsel present and determine what the next step should be, and also what will be the bail conditions, if any, in terms of waiting for this case to be disposed of. But in terms of what would happen with her as New York State Attorney General, she is an elected official, so I do not see her being removed from her position with this mere allegations, because again, an indictment is mere allegations. She has not been convicted of anything, and we're far away from such thing happening.
Okay, Bernarda, Aaron, and Catherine, thank you all.
It came with no public debate, no congressional vote, and no prior leaks. Just a memo. Donald Trump told Congress that the United States is now in an armed conflict with drug cartels. Not a policing effort, not counter-narcotics enforcement, an armed conflict. In legal terms, it's a war, even if the White House avoids that word. By labeling traffickers as unlawful combatants, Trump gave himself the same powers used after 9/11. Drone strikes, indefinite detentions, and overseas operations, all without declaring war on another country. The memo reached Congress at midnight. Within hours, media outlets scrambled to confirm it wasn't satire. Critics called it executive overreach on steroids. Supporters hailed it as a strength. But beneath the slogan is a dangerous precedent. When presidents redefine enemies, laws bend with them. And once that line is crossed, history shows it's never easily uncrossed. For the first time in U.S. history, a president has declared an armed conflict not against a nation, but against a network. It sounds bold until you realize networks have no borders, no uniforms, no rules of war. By calling cartels unlawful combatants, Trump unlocked powers that allow strikes anywhere threats are found. That could mean Venezuela today, Honduras tomorrow, and by his logic, even U.S. soil. Lawmakers immediately questioned what intelligence justified this. The memo offered none. No clear evidence of new attacks, no congressional authorization, and no allied consultation. The Pentagon, caught off guard, scrambled to redefine missions that had been run by law enforcement for decades. International law experts warned this could violate the UN Charter's sovereignty clause, essentially turning anti-drug operations into undeclared wars. In Latin America, outrage spread fast. Venezuela condemned it as piracy under a flag. Mexico demanded an emergency OAS session, calling it an assault on regional stability. Even allies quietly signaled alarm. Canada and Spain both urged restraint and clarification. Inside the U.S., civil liberties groups drew comparisons to the early war on terror, when fear justified overreach and secrecy became policy. The deeper irony: cartels rely on the same global trade system that U.S. corporations helped build. Weaponizing war rhetoric doesn't solve that. It hides it. This isn't a military strategy, it's a political performance, one meant to project dominance while deflecting from domestic failures. A government shutdown, inflation, and public unrest. And history reminds us, when leaders blur the line between policing and war, civilians always pay first. Do you think this war on cartels is really about drugs or about power? Let us know in the comment section. Should any president be allowed to declare war without Congress even voting?